My name is Jason, as I mentioned earlier. I just want to spend a minute talking about Sports Spectrum, and then we'll introduce our panel and get into a discussion about trials and temptations. So this will be a really good panel. I think a lot of people have shown already and told me that they're interested in this. But Sports Spectrum, I've been privileged to be a part of Sports Spectrum for 7 years. I help lead our media team there, and it's part of a greater ministry called Pro Athletes Outreach. And I love what we get to do, which is tell, in essence, all of your guys' stories. Like, that's what we want to do, is highlight those in the sports world, athletes, coaches, and so many other people, including many people on this panel and the panels to come today, who've been gracious enough to allow us to platform them, if you will, to tell their stories about Jesus. I often say when we talk to athletes, some of the big name athletes, we just talked to CJ Stroud a couple weeks ago. That podcast hasn't come out yet. It's coming out soon. But we talked to CJ Stroud, and he's telling us, thank you, because we're asking him questions about Jesus. So he doesn't have to sort of insert Jesus into his answers. He's actually being asked questions about his faith, which is really cool. And I consider that an honor and a privilege that we get to do that. And what Sports Spectrum is for you guys is, I just want it to be a tool to encourage you guys. Mike talked about, Pastor Mike, and encouraging, right? Like, let this show, this podcast, this website, the new app that's coming pretty soon, Sports Spectrum app. I wish I could have you guys download it all right now, but it's not ready yet, so can't go there. But anything that we do, the stories we've written, the magazine, the social media pages, our Instagram page has been going crazy the last couple years. We want that to be an encouragement for you guys, to be a tool in your tool belt as you go out and live your faith out for Jesus. So we have a bunch of magazines. We even got some discount cards. Hopefully everybody gets one. If you want to go over there, my colleague Becca, who's in the back, can give those to you, or we're probably just going to find you and hand them to you. Hopefully you guys aren't offended by that. But we want you guys to have these resources. And if you have any questions about Sports Spectrum, please ask Becca or myself. If you have athletes, coaches, ideas of people that we should be talking to as well, we welcome those ideas for Sports Spectrum. So that's the plug. That's the pitch for that. I really want to get to this because I'm very excited. I'm going to introduce our panel to you. We're going to be talking about navigating trials, navigating temptations. It's like the quote that, Mike said about who needs encouragement? Well, are you breathing? Well, who goes through who goes through trials and temptations? Well, are you breathing? Because that's basically all of us that we have to walk through in this journey. So to my left here, we're going to introduce first Chris Klein, who is a former pro soccer player, spent 13 years in the MLS. From 2013 to 2023, he was the president of the Los Angeles Galaxy in the MLS and also a member of the United States men's national team. Let's give it up for Chris Klein. Did I get that right? Everything? Okay, good. Because last year I introduced someone and I called them like they were the 6th pick or the 7th pick. It was Jonathan Isaac, the basketball player, and he stopped me and he goes, I was the 6th pick. Oh, stinking Wikipedia. All right. To his left is Jay Jacobs. Jay was here last year, former athletic director with the Auburn Tigers, former executive associate AD for the Florida Gators, and the co-founder, I think it's one of the coolest things that you've co-founded, the ADs, athletic directors for Christ. So welcome, Jay Jacobs. And down at the end is my friend, Molly McManimie. She is an NFL player agent currently serving with the Wasserman Group. She's in Las Vegas. She's been on Sports Spectrum multiple times and is one of the great people I know in this industry. Let's give it up for Molly McManimie. All right, trials and temptations, right? They're two different things, I think, a lot of ways when we look at this. It's, we could marry those together, but they're kind of different, right? A trial and a temptation can often be very different. So we're going to start with trials first. Molly, ladies first, we'll start with you. How have you viewed trials in the journey that you've been on with Jesus and the journey that you've been on as a professional? I think so. No, it's not on? How about? Check.
Check. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with as a professional because my journey is one that when I started in this business in 2015, I was what I call a believer, not a follower. So I hadn't been baptized yet as an adult. And so as a professional, before deciding to follow Jesus, trials were extremely difficult. And like you said, they're inevitable. But in my business, it's extremely competitive, and we face a ton of rejection. I get told no way more than I get told yes when it comes to recruiting players and talent. But you also, face a lot of adversity when it comes to just the life of your client. They get cut, and there's just a lot that happens in our business. But it was exhausting, and it was heavy because I was doing it on my own will and, trying to fix everything on my own. And thankfully got baptized 4 years into this business in 2019. And as a Jesus follower, to the other part of your question, it's a lot easier. It doesn't mean that it's not, difficult for the flesh, and it's not difficult to not be tempted to cut corners or to do some of the things some of my counterparts in the industry are doing in order to avoid adversity, or at least to appear like you are. But I would say they aren't less or fewer. If anything, I think sometimes they're more, but I view them now as an opportunity to, dwell in the valley with Jesus. And what a privilege that is. When I, come across a trial now, it's just, to me, I hesitate to say I get excited about adversity because I don't need more right now. But I do now see it as an opportunity to be refined. And I know now what's on the other side of that when you do it with Jesus. And it really, it's one of the joys of being a Christian is nothing is for nothing.
Nothing is for nothing. I like that. Jay, trials are a part of life, part of the profession. How have you dealt with the trials that have come your way?
And I agree with you, Jason. I think that trials and temptations are completely different. Trials, I look at as that's external. That's something we're all going to go through. Temptation is internal for me. And I know we'll talk more about that. But, I think it's in James, the first chapter, and then also in 1 Peter, the first chapter. It talks about trials and perseverance. And I try to stand on those. And the things that I'm saying to you are the things that I'm still learning. So I'm not there. I'm like the little lady at the tent revival in Alabama where I'm from. She comes running to the front. She says, I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I'm going to be. At least I'm not what I was. So that's where I am. I'm a work in progress. But trials, the way that I've learned through my maturity, my spiritual maturity, Jason, is that, I'm either about to go into one, I'm in one, or I'm coming out of one. And God uses those. He allows trials to happen. He doesn't tempt us, but he allows trials to happen to refine us. My grandmother used to say, he's using that to knock off the rough edges so I fit better in heaven. And that's exactly what they are, but they're no fun. And but they're going to happen. And so I think we have to train for them. That's what I think we have to do, and spiritually train for them.
Yeah, one of my least favorite verses in the Bible is James 1, what you just talked about, where it says, consider it joy when you face trials of many kind. And I don't want to be joyful in those trials often. Molly, you're a little backwards on that, where you're just getting excited.
I was trying to move away from her when she was like, I want more of it.
Yeah, I'm not considering joy always, but I do think there's obviously a reason and a purpose of what James was talking about, because they refine you, they produce perseverance. Chris, being a follower of Christ, how is going through trials and being a follower of Jesus helped you to see those differently than maybe the world would see those trials when they come?
For me, working in sports, this has changed for me, understanding what it's like to go through trials. We're in an industry that is judged on wins and losses and performance that happens. And what have you done for me lately? I stepped off the field and straight into the front office. And my first, 5, 6, 7 years working in sports were amazing. We won a lot. We won 3 championships. I got individual awards. It was a lot of fun. And naturally things shifted and changed. And we had to fire coaches, and performance changed. And in that, the way that I was able to walk through trials and what I understood about trials changed as well, because trials can be really big and feel really big, and they can also be, facing how we get up in the morning. And most recently, I walked through, it felt like I was walking through fire. Literal fire. You can read about it, but I literally had fans that were showing up. It felt like we were a third world country in Europe, with my face on it, with a target, and it was like they were shooting me through with a bullet and burning things. And it was something that I looked at and said, God, this has to be you, because it was so out of this world. And so being rooted in faith and having to go back to those things and the foundation, the firm foundation, which we sang before, I had to go back to that because I had nowhere else to turn. And being able to walk through that and not totally crumble. I would have people that would come and look at me and say, how are you not crumbling? And it's because you're standing on a firm foundation, and you have Jesus literally in the fire with you. And so, this is changing for me. You mentioned I think a little bit younger, and but I'm close, and so I'm still forming into what I'm going to be. And even being able to sit up here and share experiences with a lot of young people in the room that are just getting in to this industry, which is an amazing, fulfilling, gratifying industry that we can be in. But there are trials that you are going to go through, and how we walk through them not only matters to you and the people that are around you, but it also is a testimony to people that you work with.
Yeah. Wow. I guess the joy in that, Chris, right, is that God is with you. Like, it's not joyful for you to have your name in a picture on a sign with a bullseye on it. Like, that sounds horrible. But the joy, I wouldn't want that, by the way. But the joy is that Christ is with you, right?
Yeah. When you take a step back and you literally think of considering it joy and knowing that God is in it. And, what I really felt in the moment was that God was going to redeem it right then, and that I was going to be shown victorious in it. And instead, he took me out of it. And I'm sitting here before you in that space right now, following what God is going to do in my life and my career. And it's totally different than I thought it was going to be. And also having the realization and the understanding that it's probably way better than I think it's going to be. And that's a hard thing, because I like to plan and I have an idea of what I think it should be. And in the moment, trying to rest and trying to understand what God wants it to be in my life.
Yeah. Molly, as you're working with athletes and your clients, and they're the ones maybe more than you that would have their, the bullseye and the face on the sign, like get that guy out of here or whatever. How has your faith helped you manage those trials for those that you work with? Well,
first of all, don't read the comments ever. That's the rule number one.
Totally.
No, but I think to what you were saying is just remembering that, people do notice that when you, as a follower of Jesus, are going through something, they're going to be paying attention. And I think a big part of why God has me in my job is to reach my clients. I am lucky to work with a lot of believers, but I also work with guys who aren't. And so for me, I always say that I'm supposed to be the calm in the storm and the peace for them that allows them to continue to focus on what they need to, whether that's on the field or with their family, and be that calming presence. And when you're able to walk through things peacefully, or more peacefully than people can comprehend, and like you said, just having that ability to navigate something that they think, oh my gosh, if I was going through that, I would be just, laying and curling up in bed and not leaving my house. But when you're walking through it with clients or with athletes who maybe don't know God the way that you do or don't have a relationship with God at all, you just have to remember that they're learning from you, and it's an opportunity to show them what a life with Christ can be like. And like, I remember, I think I've told you this story, Jason, but it's funny you have Nick Foles on the TV, because I work with Zach Ertz, and I'll never forget, before I got baptized, I read an article about him talking about his demeanor, Nick's demeanor, and how he never gets really up and never gets really down. And Zach was like, I want that. And then when I read that before I got baptized, I was like, wait, I want that too. And so it's that same thing of like, you know, showing up for them in a way where maybe something will be planted in their head of, I want that. Like, why are you able to? And I've actually like recently had a client text me and ask me, how did you get started on your spiritual journey? And I was like with Jesus. Is that what you mean?
Spiritual journey.
Yeah, I had to make sure he meant Jesus. Yeah. But yeah, just remembering that like, that's really why we're here. It's not about wins and losses and the things that the world sees, but we're here to save souls. So the way we navigate it with our coworkers, for me, that's, you know, athletes and whatnot, but for other people, it could be other, you know, people in their office. Just remembering that the way you navigate it could be the thing that makes people ask questions.
Yeah. Jay, last word on trials. You're in a similar boat. We were in a similar boat, different, being an AD, but still kind of behind the scenes somewhat, with the athletes being front facing, the coach being front facing, and they're the ones getting the target. How has your faith helped you navigate those trials for them and for yourself too? Because you've had them probably even yourself too, because you might make a decision that, you know, fans may not agree with or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, I made one of those decisions fans didn't agree with. It's times about 100. So what's interesting is that so when I don't walk, you know, we were talking about at our table, I don't walk around with my Bible in my hand. But it's interesting. I was at the University of Florida for the last 5 years. And one day I walked in my office, quick story, Jason. Yeah. Walked in my office, there's this brand new Bible on my desk. And it was a study Bible. I thought, wow, I wonder where that came from. And about 2 weeks later, a guy down the hall says, hey, did you get that Bible I put on your desk? I said, yeah. I said, thank you very much. He said, well, you know, I figured you could use it better than I could. And I said, what do you mean? And, you know, that could go either way. And he said, I just knew that, you know, it's obvious to us that, you know, you read that and you study that. So somebody gave it to me, so I wanted you to have it. My point of that is the encouragement is that, you know, I never held a Bible study there. I never openly prayed. It was just, I mean, as corny as it may sound, they'll know you're Christians by your love. And so when you talk about the coaches, I mean, somebody asked me last night, a young gentleman, a Christian, said, you know, is it hard being a Christian and being an AD? I don't know. And I had reservations about that when I became AD. I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't know how I could have been without being a Christian. Chris is talking about the foundation. Without that foundation, I'd be blowing in the wind every day. And so two things I wanted to say, if you don't mind, Jason, to finish this up. One is that there are probably other professions that that didn't come to mind right now, but the profession that you all are in is so visible. There's no other business, I don't think, that has a couple of channels that are 24/7 talking about what you do. So your trials that you go through personally and professionally could end up there, which makes it really unique for all of us in this room. And the way that we have to do that is just like we talked about last night, community. Because there's no way that any of us can do what we need to do that God would have us do without community and without encouragement, because what you're hearing every day from social media can beat you down. And so I just want to encourage you. This thing here that Drew has put together is unbelievably encouraging for me. And it needs to, I hope it is for you as well. You know, God has you here for a reason. And so maybe I answered your question, Jason, maybe I didn't. The point is that trials are going to happen. They're going to happen to you personally, and they're going to happen to you professionally. and you're in a unique role because yours may be the whole world. You may end up at the grocery store and somebody says, how's it going on this particular thing? And if you were doing something else completely, they would have no idea. So it magnifies what you're doing. So that is where I've learned that I've got to be rooted in even more than my neighbor.
Yeah.
I have to be, because the whole world's knowing the trial I'm going through. And Chris, I want to share one last thing with you is that, so I left Auburn. I didn't like the way I left. Okay. I didn't like how it went down, but it's amazing what God did during the next 4 months. And I ended up at the University of Florida, which was even on my radar. So trials sometimes benefit us immediately, and sometimes they benefit us later. I just want you to be encouraged, man.
I appreciate
God's got you going.
I know he does.
He does. He does.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, somebody was listening to the message earlier.
Yeah.
Way to go, Jay. Thanks, Pastor Mike.
My name's Barnabas. That's good.
Yeah. We're going to call him Barnabas from now on. All right. So the other side of this is temptations, right? And navigating temptations. And interestingly enough, we asked for questions from the audience before we got here today. And a bunch of you guys sent in some questions for this panel and for the panel later this afternoon. But they were all on temptation. There wasn't really any questions about trials, which I thought was interesting. So I want to make sure we spend some proper time here on temptations. This was a question from the audience. Can you share a specific example of a time when you encountered a moral dilemma or temptation in your professional career and how your faith guided your decision-making process? So I'll start with Chris, maybe, on that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Who is clearly thinking, I don't know if I can think of one right now. But I'll start with you, just kind of maybe even some thoughts if you don't want to go too deep, and then I'll have the rest of the panel answer.
Deep. Yeah, I mean, temptations, especially in the industry that we work in. I mean, there's a temptation to think it's us. There's a temptation to operate with integrity and honesty. I think that maybe the best example I have is working in a professional sports organization and having to deal with players, having to deal with contracts, having to deal with leagues, is the dealing with people that don't have the same foundation and morals as you do. And how do you walk through that? And how do you stand firm on what you believe? Specifically, I worked with a general manager who honesty and integrity were not his strong suits. And having to walk through that on a daily basis and wanting to show love, encouragement, support in what we were trying to do, at the same time, just so clearly seeing that we didn't line up and the way that we work didn't line up. And it certainly didn't line up with my values. And it was a really, really difficult thing. And candidly, I mean, I succeeded and failed in showing him how I would operate, and having to go back. I mean, when Jesus was tempted, he constantly responded with it is written. And so having to go back to the word and being encouraged by that. My wife walks around our house listening to music and songs. And so a lot of times it will come in that type of truth that comes to me. Hey, listen to the song. And just those reminders and being surrounded by people that are not only encouraging you, but holding you accountable, I have found to be incredibly valuable.
That's good. Yeah. Molly, you want to tackle that question?
Sure. I can actually just piggyback on what he just said. And this goes to trials and temptations. But I was recently going through something really difficult, and I was having to move out of my house. And this isn't part of my job, but to the point of having the right people and things going on. I listen to worship music almost exclusively, and I kind of joke about it. But I was literally like moving my stuff into storage, and I noticed that I was unintentionally like reciting scripture in my head because I had been listening to a certain song, and it was, that's what was like reverberating, in my head. And I had a moment where I just paused because I was like, thank goodness, like that's what I'm filling my soul with, because I could have Cardi B lyrics playing in my head right now, that wouldn't be very helpful or encouraging, but I have this, going through my head. And it just reminded me why we sit down and we read scripture, we memorize it and we listen to these songs. It's not always for that moment, but later on, when you're going through a trial or a temptation, if that's what you're filling your spirit with, that's what's going to guide you. But to the question on temptations, in our business, and I'm lucky that I have another sports agent here, she knows, it's very driven by money and, the highest picks in the draft and the people that are making the most money and doing the most are the biggest contracts. And it's a daily temptation to not just say, screw it, leave all my values behind and chase that, because that's what gets put on lists. That's what gets the accolades. That's who's getting put on TV and what people are talking about. And I know in my heart, that's not what makes a good agent. So I have to stick to that. But the temptation, it's a daily thing, dying to that every single day and waking up, because you're surrounded by it, not just in the industry, but sometimes in your own office and in your own internal meetings, because not everyone you're working with is a believer. And so just that daily struggle and tension of reminding myself that my success is not worldly. So it's not defined the way the world defines it. And I'm not only successful if I get a first round or only successful if I negotiate a groundbreaking contract. That's not why I'm here. But the temptation is there always, because it's what drives so much of what's around me. And just, again, just being able to stay rooted in, I have a small group that I go to every Wednesday. It's non-negotiable. I my life gets moved around that, unless I'm on the road for something that I have to be on the road for, but that's non-negotiable. Scripture in the morning, even if it's one verse, and, making sure, again, you're playing the worship music and filling your soul with the right things, communicating with your accountability people, everything. It'll just remind you to come back to it, because the temptation is not going to go away, not in sports. Yeah. And our flesh is weak. It's always going to be weak. So we can't think it's going to change, one day. But if we keep feeding the spirit, that's what's going to keep us on the right path.
Yeah, that's good. I think that segues into the next question. Jay, I'll start with you on this. From the audience, this question was, how do you manage your pride when success finds you in your respective role? So Molly kind of just alluded to that a little bit, the chasing of that success. But how do you manage your pride when you're winning a national title, or when you're having everyone, say you're the greatest or whatever, or patting you on the back? How do you manage that? Because pride can be a dangerous thing.
I think that the way that over time that I've learned to manage it, because at one time I was really bad about it, is really, you look at Proverbs, and particularly Proverbs, I think it's 11, talks about pride and dismay or disgust that comes from that. God just has a wonderful way of humbling you. And then when you're at an athletic director of 21 sports and one of them does real well, there's a fan base of 20 others that have an opportunity to humble you as well. Maybe they didn't do as well, but the pride piece, to me, it is one that we have to tend to as much as we do the temptations in the trial. Because anything, you both were mentioning earlier, there's a song that comes to mind when you all were talking about songs, and I think it's Casting Crowns, A Slow Fade. Is that who sings that?
Yeah.
So so pouring things into your heart and mind is really important, and because I've learned both sides of that. So when you start thinking about pride, is it a slow fade? Is it that all of a sudden now you're beginning to think about, okay, maybe I did do this. But the wonderful thing about Jesus is that he'll bring you back down and say, you know what? The only reason all this is happening is because of me. That's it. And I'm more proud of that knowing now that I can hear him straightening me up than I could a few years ago. So, pride is something that we all have to tend to. We have to tend to it because it will seep into us personally, in our marriages, in our relationships with family and friends, and it will certainly professionally. We have to tend to the pride. And Proverbs has a load of scripture about that.
I remember when I became a follower of Jesus at the age of 27, one of the first things my brother told me after this moment is, remember now, Jay, it's not about you. And it was like, oh, really? Because it feels like it's about me. He's like, no, none of this is about you, because that's where the pride seeps in. Chris, how have you managed pride being not only an executive, but a player as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the same things, and having, going back to humility and who Jesus was, that he came to serve and not to be served, and always having that vision. And like I said, it was something early in my front office career, just having to deal with that, having to walk through both success and then walking through failures, understanding that it isn't only you when you win and only you when you lose. And so that's something that, again, when you're involved in sports and athletics, those things you learn when you're young, and hopefully you can carry them through later in life.
That's good. So another question from the audience, Molly, we'll start with you. What are effective strategies for building relationships, and you kind of alluded to this with your small group, that help people avoid perilous situations and environments?
Yeah. Can you start at the beginning of the question again?
Absolutely. What are some effective strategies?
Strategies
for building relationships that have helped you and help people avoid, the perilous situations, maybe falling into temptation and the environments that might surround that?
I think it all boils down to discipline. Because in sports, again, we travel a lot, or a lot of us have to be on the road a lot in order to do our job effectively. ADs work insane hours, spend a lot of time in your office. But if we can build, schedules and little habits that tend to that, then to me, that is what keeps me grounded. And when it comes to building that community, for me, that's checking in with my group chat and for me, the biggest thing that's helped me in my community is being honest. And that's not being afraid to ask for prayer when you need it. I used to feel like when I would ask my small group for prayer, or my, fellow believers in the industry, that I was a burden, or I was bothering them, or that what I was going through wasn't as, someone's in the group chat saying, oh, like, can you pray for my mom? She just got diagnosed with cancer. And so you feel silly asking them to pray for you because you're going through something at work. But when you're with a genuine community, they care about all of it. And so asking for prayer, asking for help, and just being honest has helped me so much, because I think all of us here are type A and we're achievers, and we like to have this, persona of being okay and like we can do anything. And so it can be hard to have that transparency of being just real with people. But a real community in Christ is there for the good, bad, the ugly, all of it. And they want to help you. And so not just, attending the Bible studies and being there, but really letting your community in on what you're going through and what you need in every season in order to stay, in your faith and disciplined.
That's good. Yeah. How about you, Jay? Any strategies there that have helped you?
The thing that I'll add to what Molly was saying is that professionally, that community of having someone that was a peer of mine that I could call and say, hey, look, man, this is going on. And Scott Strickland and Mitch Barnhart and I started that early on as all ADs. Somebody that, it was in the chair and could relate to what was happening professionally. That was so solid for me, and just such a big help for me. And then personally, it's the same thing that Molly's saying is, is it my small group? Is it my closest buddies? Are we equally yoked that I can talk to these things about? That's my strategy. Yeah. Because I can't do it alone. So who are the fellow believers? And I have a Christian mentor that's about 15 years older than I am, that God put in my life about 10 years ago. That's just unbelievable. So, but you have to have your spiritual sensors up for allow those people to come into your life.
Yeah. How about Chris? Any thoughts there?
I mean, I think you have to build in those things. But the other thing is also having the reality, working in sports, this is men or women, I mean, your quickest way out of this business is an inappropriate relationship. And that can be true or not. I've had friends that have been very public and have been accused of that, and it wasn't true. And it doesn't matter, because day one of the news is the only thing that people read. And so being able to have that understanding and to put yourself in positions, especially as a believer, when they know that you are working as a female agent, working as a male executive, having that understanding and knowing that the devil's a real thing, and he would love nothing more than to see this entire room out of an industry that people get emotional about. And so having that understanding and realizing it and talking about it and surrounding yourself with people that know that and can hold you accountable, but also building in practices for yourself that keep you out of those situations, because it can not only hurt your career, but it can also compromise the kingdom and what people think about a Christian working in sports and how they navigate life.
Well, I think that's a great way to kind of wind down here with that, is guardrails. And he kind of alluded to some of this, but Jay, I'll start with you with just some intentional guardrails that you had that were kind of non-negotiables, like Molly said, that you put in your life. Molly, I'll have you finish after Jay, and then we'll wind down.
Well, sort of, I will. One guardrail is, we're godly, we're Christian, but we still have to be professional, and you don't have to separate those. So, I never had a meeting in my office with a closed door with the female. I never did it. And anytime I had a meeting with the female, I'd always have maybe another female in there as well, or at least another person, because I don't want to have any misunderstandings. It's really for their protection, but it's really for mine as well. So professionally, there are several guardrails you need to put in place, and you can still be a professional and a Christian and an encourager and loving, but sometimes we think that means being more vulnerable than professional. I just say, put your guard up and be a professional, because you can be both. The other is that what Molly alluded to is each day I have to wake up, and before my feet hit the ground, when I do it, when I'm disciplined enough to do it, it's okay, Jesus, what am I doing for you today? Staying in the Word, staying in prayer, and in fellowship with other believers, because there's so much of the other stuff going on around us that we can get distracted and get sucked into what's happening. So my guardrails, Jason, and you all, is who am I hanging out with? What am I listening to? What movies am I watching? What is my scripture? What is my prayer life before 8 o'clock in the morning? Because the attack's coming, as you said, Chris. I mean, it's going to come. And so how can I be? It's just like, you know what? We're not going to send a team out there on the field without practicing. We got to practice for trials and temptations. You got to suit up every day in his armor and practice for that. Just all of a sudden wake up one day and all of a sudden it all hits you like a storm and you're not prepared for it. You're going to sink. I've done it. I've sunk, I've drowned, but he pulled me back up. And he's taught me that when I equip myself, when I practice and I train for those things spiritually, then he's got me. Trials are still coming, but I'm more equipped for them when they do. And temptations are what I do. I'm careful where I put my feet. Trials are going to come. People are going to bring those things to me, and I'm going to create some of those on my own. I'm just careful where I put my feet in my temptations. Movies, who I'm hanging out with, what I'm listening to, those type things. I'm careful where I put my feet. Put my feet on holy ground. If it's not holy ground, I shouldn't be standing there. Now I'm about 50-50 on that now, boys and girls. I mean, so pray for me on that. So.
Oh, that's good. Molly, last word.
Yeah, I love what you said about your office protocol that you had. And I think as a newer follower of Christ, I would cringe at those things initially because it felt so almost performative. Like, oh, that you're such a good Christian. You're level 10. You don't even sit in the room with a woman. But I get it now because, like I said earlier, our flesh is weak. And you don't know what narratives people are going to put out there. And we can't control that, but we can control what we do. And so I think a guardrail just in general is just not being afraid to have those boundaries and those standards for yourself, and not being afraid of if people make fun of you, for it, or they mock you for it, because you know what God is telling you to do in order to be able to do his work at your best. And if that's like, you only group chat, a married, or you only text a married guy with his wife in the group chat, that's a rule I have. And it's not because I think me or someone else is going to do something wrong, but it's just having that extra layer of respect and protection in there to not even put yourself in a position to let someone else dictate what's going to happen next. And professionally, that can mean so many things. But I think the biggest thing is just remembering that there are going to be people who have opinions about it, but they don't have to live with your consequences. So you can't be more concerned with their opinions than you are with what is going to come in your life because of something, and stick to it even when you don't feel it necessarily.
Wow, amen. I need a copy of this, Drew, because I didn't get to take notes. I hope you guys were taking amazing notes, because I need to watch this again and take some notes. Let's give it up for Chris Klein, Jay Jacobs, and Molly McManimie.
Favorite,